And now I'm like really confused. And he says, you don't know anything about who you are as a Jew. When he said those words, it hit me like a ton of bricks. My name is Rabbi Motti Flikshtein. I am a Chabad Rabbi in Wilmington, Delaware. Together with my wife, we run the Hebrew School, a camp. I run a community teen program called C-Teen. We run things for young families, overall community-wide programs and events.
You definitely appear like a religious Jew, but that wasn't always the case. So can you take us back to the home you were growing up in and tell us a little bit about what the word Jewish or Jew or Judaism meant to you, if anything?
My parents are from the former Soviet Union, so growing up, they didn't have any kind of Jewish education or upbringing whatsoever. Since they weren't raised with anything Jewish at all, that was how me and my sister were raised as well. It wasn't anything malicious at any point. It was just that they didn't know any better. So growing up in my home, I knew that I was Jewish. That was never a question. I just didn't know in any way, shape, or form what that may have meant.
You mentioned in some of your other talks that you went to a Jewish school, but you were titled the kid least likely to become a rabbi. So how did you earn that title?
My parents, they sent me to the local public school. And as is the case with many young kids, I got swept up into the wrong crowd. As a result, I ended up experimenting with drugs starting from a very young age. And it was very much a part of my life, this drug scene, the hip hop scene. They're not necessarily connected, but those were the kinds of things that I was doing when I was in high school. I got in trouble with the law a couple of times, both drug-related incidents, and never hurt anybody or did anything violent, but it was just as a result of this, the drug influence that I was involved in. My mother wanted to send me to the local Jewish day school. My mother thought that maybe that would be a good option for me, a better, safer environment, a more close-knit environment, although she didn't really grasp what that meant. I wanted nothing to do with going to a Jewish school as a kid. I had no idea what that even meant. All of my connections and all of my friends were in the public school that I was in. Everything that I knew was in the public school, so I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. And actually, my father, believe it or not, happened to be on my team. Not because of anything malicious, it was just the fear of the unknown, like what would happen to my son if he ends up going to a Jewish school. And in fact, at one point when my father was having this discussion with my father said, the last thing that I need is a rabbi in my house. Like in a good Jewish home, my mother had the last say. I ended up going to the Jewish school on the condition, according to my father, on the condition that I would not become religious or observant in any way, shape, or form. And the moment that he saw that that was starting to happen, they would take me out of the Jewish school and I would go back to the public school. So I go to the Jewish school and my father had nothing to worry about whatsoever. There's no way I was going to become religious, no way I was going to become a rabbi. And in fact, during my 8th grade, which was the graduating class, since it was a graduating class, in the yearbook, there was a page that had all of the awards. How did we earn these awards? Well, in advance, we would vote for each other and we would get the yearbook. We would see who won the different awards. So I was really excited when I turned to the award page and I saw that I won 2 of the awards. Award number 1 was I won Class Clown, which I was really excited about. I worked hard on that one. And the second one, and I believe it was unanimous decision, meaning that everybody in the class voted for me, was that I won least likely to become a rabbi. I suppose that it's because I was just a rebel at heart at that time. Anything that anybody would tell me to do, my nature was to always do the exact opposite. So the teachers at this Jewish school would start speaking Jewish concepts to me, and it meant nothing to me at all. I would poke fun. I spent a lot of time in the principal's office. Therefore, I was least likely to become a rabbi, according to my friends.
How did you become attracted to the hip hop genre of music, the culture? What about hip hop drew you in?
So as a kid, I was very drawn to hip hop and rap. I was very I almost looked at it like poetry to a rhythm. Set in my ways, I'm getting delayed. When will I change? I don't know. I'm just letting it wait. I loved the rhyme schemes, particularly the more complicated ones, which rhymed multiple syllables at a time. I knew everything about every rapper out there, mainstream, underground, you name it. You could, show me 4 bars of any song. I would know exactly who the rapper was, exactly the album that it was from. I kind of became like a guru in terms of my knowledge in the hip hop scene. I loved it so much, and I was like so involved in it that I decided that I wanted to write some stuff of my own. So I wrote some things and I shared it with a couple of people, and a couple of people here and there became like a little bit of a bigger group, and then a bigger group. Eventually I became a part of a rap group and had a producer, spent time in recording studios, spent time performing, never made it to like a global or international scale, but locally where I grew up, and then later when I went to college, I was pretty well known in that scene.
You were obviously pretty young when you were experimenting with all of these drugs and getting in trouble. Was there any part of you that recognized that what you were doing was not sustainable or even incorrect and left you a little bit uneasy or troubled, or were you satisfied and didn't think too deeply into what you were doing?
So for a long time, when I was involved with the drugs and everything, I was just living day by day, having a good time, living from one high to the next, and then crashing and then getting high again. And I didn't think too deeply on it. I wasn't much of a thinker at that time. And that extended into my college years. So I didn't think too much of this until I was in college. Now, when I was in college, I have to tell you that I was living the college dream. Now, anything that any college student could have ever dreamt of, I had it. And in fact, if you would have asked me anything that I would have wished for at that time that I didn't have, I wouldn't have had any answers because I checked off all of the boxes. So, for example, I had lots of friends when I was in college. I was partying every night. I wanted to go into business, but for whatever reason, the school that I was at, Brandeis University, didn't offer a business major at that time. So I took a close relative to business. I took economics, and I wanted to have some hands-on business experience. So I decided to start my own business on campus. So I decided that I was going to start selling drugs on campus. I became one of the campus dealers, where I was dealing the pot on campus. And so as a result, I ended up with a lot of money, a lot of drugs, and again, the friends, the parties. I literally had it all. But for some really strange reason, a couple of things happened that kind of changed the trajectory of my life. One of those things was that even though I had everything that I could have ever dreamt of, for some really strange reason, I still felt really empty inside. And it made no sense to me whatsoever, because if I have everything, then I should feel full. I should feel fulfilled. So where's this emptiness coming from? Another thing that happened to me was that, unfortunately, somebody who was in my group of friends actually ended up passing away because of a drug-related incident. It was a drug which was a hallucinogen, and it was laced, meaning there were certain chemicals sprinkled inside of it that led to an experience called a bad trip. And the whole group of friends had this bad trip experience, which essentially is like a nightmare that you can't wake up from. This person who was in my group of friends, unfortunately, decided to take his life. I can only speculate that it was so that he would wake up from this terrible nightmare that he was experiencing, or escape this terrible nightmare. And as you can imagine, it really shook me up. This made national news. It was a huge story in the state of Massachusetts, which is where my school was. It was a huge story on campus. It was the biggest story amongst our group of friends, myself included. And after things settled down a little bit, after a couple of weeks, I kind of thought to myself as follows. I thought, I have a lot in common with this friend. We're pretty much the same age. He was 1 year older than me. We're both students at Brandeis. We both study economics. We're both Jewish. He happened to be Jewish. But there's one huge difference between us. And that is that for whatever reason, I'm alive and he's not. And that could have very easily, God forbid, been me. And I thought to myself that if, God forbid, that was me, then would I have been satisfied with the life that I lived until that point? And the answer that I gave myself was a very strong no. And that started to bother me because after all, until that point, I'd been doing everything I was supposed to be doing. In high school, I got good grades. I got into a good college. In college, I'm getting good grades. I'm having the time of my life. And after all, life is about having fun, right? So why wouldn't I have been satisfied? And that really started bothering me. And then I also had this interesting thought process where I realized that everything that I'd been doing until that point was for something that may or may not happen at some point in the future. So, for example, in high school, I was getting good grades so that I could get into a good college. In college, I'm getting good grades so that I could get into a good grad school. In graduate school, I'm going to get good grades so that I could get a great career and so that I could make lots of money and so that I could buy a big house and a fancy car, so that I could retire early, so that I could go on lots of vacations, so that. And I realized that most of the people that I knew actually lived their entire lives that way, waiting for that elusive thing that may or may not happen at some point in the future. And I realized I knew people in their 80s, even their 90s, who are still like waiting for that thing to happen. And I thought to myself, that's crazy. I don't want to live my whole life that way, waiting for something that may or may not happen in the future. In the meantime, there's got to be a way to make right now count, to make right now meaningful, and to have happiness right now. I don't know what the answer is, but I had the question.
So now that you were more in touch with that empty feeling inside and more conscious of the fact that something was missing in your life, what directed you or inspired you to turn towards your Jewish roots, which up until now were kind of pretty latent?
I feel that in life, it's really, really important to have somebody in your life that you can feel comfortable just speaking to, opening up to, without feeling judged whatsoever. Now, for me at that time, that person was my best friend named Jason Sugarman. Now, Jason and I, we did everything together. In high school, we got into a lot of the trouble together. We were business partners in this business that I was running. We had all the fun together and everything. And I felt that I just needed to open up and share everything that's going on in my life with Jason. But the problem was that Jason, after high school, he went to this crazy place in Israel called yeshiva, which is a rabbinic institute where you get to learn more deeply about Judaism. Now, I thought that that was crazy because to me, yeshiva meant a room full of like old men with long white beards sitting over big dusty books that when you turn the page, it's like poof, a cloud of dust pops out. And there's no way my best friend Jason was in a place like that. But during my spring break from college, my parents let me go and visit Jason in Israel. Finally, I had an opportunity to open up to Jason, and I shared everything with him. This feeling of emptiness, this story about this friend who passed away, this thing about living for the future. In the meantime, what about making right now count, making right now meaningful and special? And I went on and on and on. And first of all, I remember that when I finished, it was like, a big sigh of relief. It was like a huge ton of bricks was lifted off of my shoulders. But then, I'll never forget it, Jason looked me straight in the eyes and he said to me in his eloquent English, he said, "Dude, you just don't get it." And I said, "Dude, you're right. What are you talking about?" So he said, "You know a lot about a lot of different things in your life. You know about economics and you know about rap and you know about drugs and you know about parties and you know about all this stuff." He says, but you don't know anything about the most important thing in your life. I was like, Jason, will you just get to the point? What are you talking about? So he says, you don't know anything about yourself. And now I'm like really confused. And he says, you don't know anything about who you are as a Jew. And when he said those words, it hit me like a ton of bricks, because he was absolutely right. I knew that I was Jewish. I was even in a Jewish school. But what relevance does that have to me and my life? Do I really understand who I am as a Jew? So I looked at Jason and I said, okay, so you're right. I don't know about what it means really in a deep way to be a Jew. So what should I do? So he looked at me and he said, I suggest that you take a couple of months off from school and you come and you join me here in yeshiva. He says, what is the worst case scenario? What's the worst thing that can happen if you come to yeshiva for a couple of months? He says, literally the worst thing is that it's not going to speak to you. You're going to go back to college. You're going to finish maybe one semester later. He says, but what's the best case scenario? He says, best case scenario is you're going to come, you're going to join me. What you're going to learn is going to speak to you, and it's going to give you the tools that you need to live a life full of meaning, purpose, identity, and happiness. It's going to last you your entire lifetime. And by the way, if you so desire, you can still go back to college and get your degree afterwards. What do you have to lose? So when he put it that way, I thought to myself, there really isn't much of a risk here. I remember taking off on the airplane, sitting down the next fall, waiting to take off. And I remember in my pocket, I brought with me a little blue suede yarmulke. And I remember sitting there on the plane thinking to myself that I'm going to go into this experience with a completely open mind. If it speaks to me, great. If not, I'm back to square one. I took this little yarmulke out of my pocket. I put it on top of my big afro. And from that moment on, a yarmulke never came off of my head.
So when you were growing up and you went to the Jewish school, one of the conditions your father made was not to become religious, and you were also the person least likely to become a rabbi. Did you still have any of those aversions or fears of becoming observant? Like, you were open-minded to go study and find your identity, but was there a part of you that was afraid you might take a very hard right turn?
By that point in my life, I already experienced so many different things that were on the other side of the coin, the other lifestyle that I was living, that at that point, I was ready for a new experience. I was ready for a deeper experience, one which was less shallow, one which I wouldn't wake up the next day after having a great time and just feel empty. So wherever this experience was going to take me, I was open to at that time.
Can you share your first few weeks or what you remember of yeshiva when you first got there? And what were some of the Jewish ideas that sort of struck you straight away and confirmed that this was the right decision?
Right when I got to yeshiva, immediately I was blown away because I was learning things about being Jewish that I never heard before. So, for example, I learned that just like we have a body and it's important to feed our bodies, we also have this thing called a soul. And it's equally important, if not more important, to feed and nourish our soul. Well, how do we nourish our soul? Well, we have this whole slew of things called mitzvahs, commandments, that any time you do any little mitzvah, and by the way, that's an oxymoron. There's no such thing as a little mitzvah, a little commandment. Each one is absolutely infinite. But each time we do one of these mitzvahs, we are feeding and nourishing our soul. Anytime we engage in a little bit of Torah study, we are feeding and nourishing our soul. So boom, the light bulb started to go off. Remember this feeling of emptiness? So of course I'm going to feel empty because I've been spending every waking moment of every day thinking about what am I going to do to feed the desires and the pleasures of my body. And I never spent a moment thinking about what am I doing to feed the needs of my soul. So of course I'm going to feel empty. My entire life, I'm ignoring this critical component of my being. Another thing that blew me away when I was in yeshiva. I started to learn what a mitzvah is. Through learning Hasidic philosophy, I learned the deeper understanding of what this word mitzvah means in addition to being a commandment. It also means a connection. Because any time we do one of these mitzvahs, we are creating an infinite connection between our soul and infinity, between our soul and thousands of years of Jewish history, between our soul and millions of other Jewish souls over the centuries who have engaged in that same mitzvah. So I'm totally blown away. I'm starting to take on one mitzvah at a time. I'm starting to feel like I have this unbelievable opportunity every single day to create this infinite connection. And the light that's created by a mitzvah is a light that can never, ever be extinguished. Anything else that we have in life can be gone like this. God forbid I can lose my job, my health, my money, my family, my car, my home. All of that can come and go. The only thing that I can say that I have forever is the mitzvah that I do, because that's between me and God, and nobody could ever take that away from me. And here's the kicker. When does that connection take place? Not when I'm 90, not when I'm 80, not in 10 years, not in 10 minutes. It happens right here, right now. Because every single moment, I have an unlimited amount of opportunities to do a mitzvah. So I no longer have to wait for this elusive thing that may or may not happen at some point in the future, because I can draw happiness, joy, and meaning into this moment right here and right now.
Can you describe the transition from first meeting these Jewish ideas until you fully embrace this observant lifestyle?
So once I was attracted to the Jewish philosophy, and I felt that this was where the meaning is, and this is where truth is, and living a true life is, I started to take on mitzvahs one at a time and kind of really rapidly started to take them on, which I don't recommend in general. Oftentimes when people take on too much at once, they get overwhelmed and drop everything. The healthiest way is one baby step at a time. But for me, I was just so thirsty. I felt like I was so parched, that I just wanted to take as much in as I possibly could. And I loved every second of it. So throughout that year, I'm taking on different mitzvahs. I stopped doing drugs by the end of that year, thank God. So often we use the word, I have to do this. I have to go to work. I have to wake up. I have to do a mitzvah. If we could change that word have to, instead of using the word have to, use the words get to. And see every moment as an opportunity. I don't have to wake up in the morning. Oh, my alarm clock's going up. I have to wake up. I get to wake up. Not everybody gets to wake up. I have to put on tefillin. No, I get to put on tefillin and have this infinite connection with God. I have to change a diaper. I get to change a diaper. I have a baby and I get to change the baby's diaper. How many people wish they had a baby to change that baby's diaper? It's that one word shift that I was able to make really helped me embrace the entirety of Jewish observance. Eventually, over time, I really embraced everything that Judaism had to offer, seeing it as an opportunity and not as a burden.
During this time, did you feel like you had to give up rap? Because that was definitely something you valued and cared for and appreciated, obviously. So how did it work with becoming more observant and, maybe those role models you had as a kid, what did they become to you now?
So when I started to become observant, honestly, I completely dropped anything that had to do with rap. Didn't listen to it. I stopped writing. I stopped performing for 3 years until my rabbi, Rabbi Aryeh Weinstein, asked me one time, and he knew me before I made my transformation. He asked me, what are you doing with your rap? I said, rap? Me? Come on, I'm an observant Jew. What am I going to do with rap? Like, that's my old lifestyle. He said, what are you talking about? He said, every single gift that we have is a God-given gift. Any talent must be used for the positive. He says, so you can accomplish through writing a positive song with positive messages, what you can accomplish from one song, I can't accomplish from giving 1,000 sermons. He said, so not only are you allowed to rap, but it's a sin not to rap in your case, because you have such a strong ability. And he actually convinced me to write my album and to go out and share my story publicly as much as I possibly can. Because the concept is that every single one of us has some kind of talent. It's just a matter of how we can channel that, whether it's with art, whether it's from being a professional, whether it's from being a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant. Every one of us can channel our gifts in a positive, godly way, bringing more light to this world. 'Cause in his heart of hearts, a child always wants to come home, and his father wants to bring his children into his arms. You simply open up your ears and hear he's trying to call for you to come home. Please come home, just come home to Tati. Set in my ways, I'm getting delayed. When will I change? I don't know, I'm just letting it wait. I'm thinking when I'll get paid, and when I'm getting a date. Misbehaved in ways and played games I'm regretting today. Stepped on the brakes. My life has been a mess and a waste. Checking my veins for a pulse, 'cause I feel dead in some ways. I started getting afraid. Did I want to be heading this way? Watching my mom dry her eyes till she was red in the face. It's gotta be better some way. And I still remember the day that I got fed up with my setup, started questioning things. Is life about getting the cake? Should I be rejecting what's fake? Why on the deathbed no one thinks about their checks in the bank? I needed a better escape, and I just felt it one day. A voice inside me told me to look up to heaven and pray, but I can't repent right away. I'm already 20 and change. Turn to Hashem with full faith, because it's never too late. I'm coming home, yeah, 'cause in his heart of hearts, a child always wants to come home, and his father wants to bring his children into his arms. You simply open up your ears and hear he's trying to call for you to come home. Please come home, just come home to Tati. In his heart of hearts, a child always wants to come home, and his father wants to bring his children into his arms. You simply open up your ears and hear he's trying to call for you to come home. Please come home, just come home to Tati.
How did your family respond to this transformation?
Often people ask, or they wonder, so how do your parents feel about everything now, right? Your father said, the last thing that I need is a rabbi in my house. Today, my parents could not be more proud of what we do, the work that we do in the community and beyond. To say that they're proud is an understatement. They are our biggest fans. And honestly, as proud as they are of us, I think that I can say that I'm probably more proud of them. Throughout the entire process, my family was really unbelievably supportive. They realized that this is something which meant a lot to me. And they were willing to go above and beyond to accommodate any changes that I decided to make in my life. For example, my parents, during that year that I was in yeshiva, when I told them I started to keep kosher, they decided to transform their kitchen into a kosher kitchen. I was in my 20s when I started to go through my transformation. They were much, much older. And since then, they've taken on many strides in their Jewish observance, strict kosher, keeping Shabbos. My father wears a yarmulke and tzitzis everywhere that he goes. Couldn't be more proud of the Jews that they are. And so I feel very, very blessed to call myself their son. One really interesting twist to the story is, remember I had this best friend, Jason Sugarman, he's the one who possibly saved my life, maybe physically, definitely spiritually. He's the one who encouraged me to go to yeshiva, which really transformed my life. So what's he up to these days? So I'm really excited to share that Jason is still my best friend, but in addition to being my best friend, Jason also happens to be my brother-in-law. So how did that happen? So I ended up marrying Jason's younger sister, Rabbi Flikshtein, formerly known as Rachel Sugarman. So this best friend who changed my entire life is now my brother-in-law. And together with his sister, we serve the community that he grew up in Delaware, hand in hand with the Chabad family that brought their family closer to their Jewish roots, the Vogel family. So there are a lot of things that came full circle.
Right at the beginning, you told us that you're a shliach, a community rabbi whose life is dedicated to sharing Judaism with others. So you obviously had your own experience with Judaism. At what point did you decide that this was going to be my life's mission now? Not only is it good enough for myself, but it's something I want to bring to others as well.
So after I had my year in yeshiva in Israel, I decided there's no way that I can go back to the college that I was at before, the whole group of friends, the scene, the business, the drugs, all of that. I could not go back there. I would slip right into it. And so I ended up transferring to Yeshiva University in Manhattan. And while I was there, I started to date this girl named Rachel. And she also didn't grow up very observant, more traditional than me, for sure. And she came close to her Jewish roots through the Chabad in Delaware, the Vogel family. And we started to date, and it became pretty clear pretty quickly that we would likely end up getting married. And it was one Shabbat morning, we were walking to synagogue together, and we were talking like young couples do about what type of lifestyle are we going to lead, what type of career. That particular walk to synagogue, it was all about what type of career path we're going to take. And honestly, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I studied economics, but I couldn't see myself becoming an economist. It's just not something I was passionate about. So Rachel looked at me and she said, well, what are you really passionate about? And I thought for a second. I said, the only thing that I could think of right now is that I love studying Torah and sharing it with others. So she said that you should become a rabbi. So I said, come on, rabbi, me. Most rabbis, they grow up with it from birth, even before birth. Their mothers are singing Shema to them in their bellies. Come on, me, you know where I was just a year ago. Rabbi, that's not going to happen. Come on. But she didn't think it was very funny. She looked at me and she said, if it's something you're really passionate about, then you're going to find a way to make it happen. And it was actually at that moment, 17 and a half years ago, that the two of us decided that there's nothing that we would rather do with our lives than to dedicate our lives to being a Chabad couple, a rabbi, and a rebbitzin, serving a community who knows wherever they're going to be naive enough to take us. But we are going to find a place to go. I'm going to become a rabbi. You're going to become a rebbitzin. We're going to rock the house. We're going to share the beauty and the warmth and the love of what it means to be Jewish, one moment at a time, and no idea how it's going to happen. But come what may, through thick and through thin, we are going to make this happen. Let's do it. We ended up moving to Delaware 13 and a half years ago, and we hit the ground running. We started with Hebrew school and a teen program and a camp, and we could not imagine being more happy than we are today. My wife, together with our 8 kids, we are on living the life, living the dream. Remember my father saying, the last thing that I need is a rabbi in my house? My class voting unanimously, least likely to become a rabbi? It's really a dream that I could have never even dreamt of, and I honestly could not imagine being more happy.
The Rohr Jewish Learning Institute has the largest collection of Jewish media online. Hit subscribe for more.